The desert highway stretched endlessly before him, a ribbon of black cutting through the rust-colored landscape of Nevada. Frank Morrison gripped the steering wheel of his Kenworth W900, feeling the familiar vibration of 18 wheels against cracked asphalt. At 58 years old, he had spent more than half his life behind this wheel, watching America roll by through a windshield that had seen better days. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, and Frank's stomach was growling. He had been driving since 4 in the morning, pushing through from Salt Lake City with a load of agricultural equipment bound for Sacramento. The fuel gauge was dipping toward empty, and according to his GPS, the next truck stop was about 10 miles ahead. He reached for the CB radio, more out of habit than necessity. The airwaves were quiet tonight, just the occasional crackle of static and distant voices discussing road conditions further north. Frank preferred it that way. After 32 years on the road, he had grown comfortable with silence. His wife Martha had passed 3 years ago, taken by a stroke that came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon while she was tending her garden. They had never had children, a source of quiet grief that they had learned to live with over the decades. Now it was just Frank and the road, 2 old companions keeping each other company through the long nights. The truck stop appeared on the horizon like a mirage, its fluorescent lights cutting through the gathering dusk. It was one of those independent places, not part of any chain, the kind that was becoming increasingly rare in modern America. A faded sign proclaimed it to be Desert Rose Fuel and Food, and beneath that, in letters that had once been red but were now a tired pink, Best Pie in Nevada. Frank guided the massive truck into the lot, finding a spot near the edge where he could park without having to back up. His knees were not what they used to be, and the climb down from the cab was getting harder every year. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the whisper of wind against the windows. The evening air was cool when he finally stepped out, carrying the dry scent of sagebrush and diesel. Frank stretched his back, feeling the vertebrae pop in a satisfying sequence, then made his way toward the building. A bell chimed as he pushed through the door, announcing his arrival to the nearly empty establishment. The interior was exactly what he had expected. Worn linoleum floors, booths with cracked vinyl seats, a long counter with swivel stools that had probably been installed during the Nixon administration. Behind the counter, a heavy-set woman with grey hair and kind eyes looked up from the magazine she was reading. "Evening," she said. Just one, Frank confirmed, "and I'll need to fill up the truck when I'm done eating." "Take any seat you like, honey. Menu's on the table. Coffee, please. Black." He slid into a booth near the window, his back to the wall out of old habit. The menu was laminated and sticky, offering the usual truck stop fare of burgers, sandwiches, and breakfast items available around the clock. Frank decided on a cheeseburger and fries, comfort food for a tired man. While he waited for the waitress to bring his coffee, he noticed movement at the edge of his vision. A small figure was huddled in the booth in the far corner, almost invisible in the shadows. Frank squinted, trying to make out the details, and felt something tighten in his chest. It was a child, a girl maybe 8 or 9 years old, with tangled brown hair and a face smudged with dirt. She was wearing a pink jacket that was too thin for the evening chill, and she was sitting perfectly still, staring at the table in front of her with the vacant expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything good from the world. Frank looked around the restaurant, searching for an adult who might belong to her. There was no one. Just the waitress behind the counter, an old man in a trucker cap reading a newspaper in another booth, and the cook visible through the pass-through window to the kitchen. The waitress appeared with his coffee, and Frank gestured subtly toward the corner booth. "That little girl over there," he said quietly. "She with anyone?" The waitress sighed, her face creasing with concern. "Been here since this morning. Says her mama went to use the restroom and never came back. We called the sheriff, but he's dealing with a pile-up on the interstate about 60 miles east. Said he'd send someone when he could, but that was hours ago." Frank felt a cold anger settle in his gut. Someone had abandoned their child at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, left her like an unwanted piece of luggage. He had seen a lot of terrible things in his years on the road, but this reached down and touched something deep inside him. "Has she eaten anything?" he asked. The waitress shook her head. "Won't take food from us. Won't hardly talk at all, except to say her mama's coming back. Poor thing's been staring at that door all day, waiting." Frank looked at the little girl again, at the rigid set of her shoulders and the desperate hope still visible in her eyes. He thought about Martha, about the children they had wanted, but never had, about the empty house waiting for him in Reno, with its rooms full of silence. "Mind if I try?" he asked. The waitress studied him for a moment, taking his measure. Frank knew what she saw. A weathered face, grey hair cropped short, hands roughened by decades of work. Nothing threatening, just an old trucker with tired eyes. "Go ahead," she said finally. "Lord knows we've tried everything else." Frank picked up his coffee and walked slowly toward the corner booth, making sure his footsteps were audible so he would not startle her. The girl's eyes flickered toward him and then away, dismissing him as another adult who could not help. "Mind if I sit down?" Frank asked, keeping his voice gentle. The girl shrugged, the smallest possible movement of her thin shoulders. Frank slid into the seat across from her, leaving plenty of space between them. He took a sip of his coffee and said nothing for a long moment, letting the silence stretch naturally. Up close, he could see more details. The girl's pink jacket had a small tear in the sleeve. Her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. There was a bruise on her cheek, faded to a sickly yellow that spoke of recent violence. "I'm Frank," he said eventually. "I drive that big truck out there." The blue one. The girl glanced out the window at the Kenworth, and Frank thought he saw a flicker of interest cross her face before the mask of indifference slid back into place. "What's your name?" he asked. For a moment he thought she would not answer. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Lily. That's a pretty name, like the flower." Lily nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "My mama named me that because lilies were her favorite." Frank felt his heart constrict. This child still loved her mother, still waited for her despite everything. That kind of loyalty in the face of abandonment was both beautiful and devastating. "The waitress tells me you've been here a while," he said carefully. "Waiting for your mama. She's coming back." Lily's voice carried a desperate conviction that broke Frank's heart. She just had to go somewhere. She said she'd be right back. Frank took another sip of coffee, buying time to find the right words. "How long ago did she leave, Lily?" The girl's facade finally cracked, and he saw the terror lurking beneath. "I don't know," she whispered. "It was morning. The sun was just coming up." "That was over 12 hours ago." Frank kept his face neutral, not wanting to add to her distress. "Did she say where she was going?" Lily shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "She just said she had to take care of something. She told me to wait here and be good. She said she loved me." "I'm sure she did," Frank said, though he was not sure of anything except that this child had been dealt a terrible hand. They sat in silence for a while, Frank drinking his coffee, Lily staring at the door. The waitress brought Frank's cheeseburger and fries, and he made a decision. "You know," he said casually, "this is way more food than I can eat by myself. Would you mind helping me out? I hate to waste good food." Lily looked at the plate, and Frank saw her swallow hard. The hunger in her eyes was unmistakable. "I'm supposed to wait for my mama," she said weakly. "You can wait and eat at the same time," Frank pointed out. "Tell you what, I'll push the plate to the middle and we'll share. That way you're not really taking food from a stranger. We're just two people having dinner together, like friends." Lily hesitated for a long moment, then reached out and took a single French fry. She ate it slowly, savoring each bite, and Frank had to look away to hide the emotion on his face. They ate in companionable silence, Lily gradually taking more food as her hunger overcame her caution. Frank made sure she got most of the burger, claiming he was not as hungry as he had thought. It was a small lie, one he was happy to tell. When the plate was nearly empty, Lily looked up at him with eyes that were too old for her young face. "Mr. Frank? Just Frank is fine. Frank," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "do you think my mama's really coming back?" It was the question he had been dreading, the one with no good answer. Frank set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly, respecting her enough to tell the truth. "I don't know, Lily. I hope so. But I do know this. Whatever happens, you're not alone. There are people who care about you, even people you've never met. The world can be hard sometimes, but it's also full of good people who want to help." Lily's eyes filled with tears, the first she had allowed herself to shed since her mother had walked away. "But what if she doesn't come back? What am I supposed to do?" Frank reached across the table, offering his hand palm up. It was an invitation, not a demand. After a moment, Lily placed her small hand in his, her fingers cold and trembling. "Then we'll figure something out together," he said. "I'm not going to leave you here by yourself. That's a promise." "You don't even know me," Lily said, her voice thick with tears. "Why would you help me?" Frank thought about the question, about the many answers he could give. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because I could not live with myself if I walked away. Because you remind me of the daughter I never had. Instead," he said simply, "because everyone deserves someone in their corner. And right now, I'm volunteering for the job." Lily's tears spilled over, running down her dirty cheeks. She did not sob, did not make a sound. Just let the tears fall silently, as if she had learned long ago that crying loudly only made things worse. Frank squeezed her hand gently and let her cry. The waitress brought more coffee and a glass of milk for Lily, setting them down with a compassionate smile. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and the desert stars began to emerge, brilliant and cold. When Lily's tears finally slowed, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket and took a shaky breath. "Can I tell you something, Frank? You can tell me anything." She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing patterns in the condensation from her milk glass. "My mama," she said quietly. "She wasn't always like this. Before Daddy left, she was different. She used to smile all the time. She used to read me stories and make me pancakes shaped like animals." "What happened?" Frank asked gently. "Daddy went away when I was 5. Just didn't come home one day. Mama tried to find him, but she couldn't. And then she started being sad all the time. Then she started taking the pills that made her sleepy. Then she started bringing men home who were mean to both of us." Frank felt the anger rising again, directed at a world that allowed children to suffer like this, at fathers who abandoned their families and mothers who chose drugs over their children, at the men who had hurt this little girl, leaving bruises that would fade from her skin but never from her memory. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said. "That's not fair. None of that is your fault." Lily looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw a wisdom that no child should possess. "I know," she said. "My teacher told me that. She was nice, Mrs. Patterson. She used to give me extra snacks because she knew I didn't have breakfast sometimes. She sounds like a good person, she was. But then we moved, and I had to go to a different school, and then we moved again. Mama kept saying we had to stay ahead of our problems, but I don't think we ever did." Frank nodded slowly, piecing together a picture of a life spent in constant upheaval, always one step ahead of disaster, until disaster finally caught up. "Lily," he said carefully, "is there anyone else? Any family who might be looking for you?" The girl was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My grandma. My mama's mama. She lives in Oregon, in a town called Ashland. Have you talked to her recently?" Lily shook her head. "Mama said Grandma didn't want us anymore. But I don't think that's true. The last time I saw her, she was crying. She hugged me really tight and told me she loved me, and she would always be there if I needed her. She gave me a necklace with a little lily on it. See." She pulled a thin chain from beneath her shirt, revealing a small silver pendant in the shape of a flower. It was tarnished and worn, but clearly treasured. Frank felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "Do you remember your grandma's last name, Lily? Or her address?" "Her name is Rose, Rose Bennett." Lily's face scrunched up with concentration. "The address? I don't know the numbers. But the house is blue, and it has a big tree in the front yard. An oak tree, Grandma said. It was there when she was a little girl like me. It was not much to go on, but it was something. Frank made a mental note. Rose Bennett, Ashland, Oregon. Blue house with an oak tree. Lily, he said slowly, what would you think about trying to find your grandma? The girl's eyes widened. Could we really do that? I think we could try, if you want to. Lily's face was a battlefield of emotions, hope and fear, longing and caution. She had been disappointed too many times to trust easily, but beneath it all, Frank saw the spark of a desperate wish fighting to stay alive. What if she doesn't want me? Lily asked, her voice barely audible. Then we'll figure out something else. But I have a feeling she does want you, Lily. Grandmas don't give necklaces and say they'll always be there if they don't mean it. Lily clutched the pendant, pressing it against her heart. My mama said Grandma was angry at her for taking me away. She said Grandma would never forgive us. Frank leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Lily, I don't know what happened between your mama and your grandma, but I do know that grandparents love their grandchildren in a way that's hard to explain. Your grandma might be angry at your mama, but I'd bet everything I own that she's not angry at you. I'd bet she's been worried sick, wondering where you are, praying you're safe. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes again. You really think so? I really do. The waitress approached their table, her face apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just got off the phone with the sheriff's department again. They're still dealing with that accident, but they're sending a deputy from Ely. Should be here in about 2 hours. Frank nodded. Thanks for the update. He looked at Lily. What do you think, kiddo? You want to wait for the deputy? Lily's face clouded with fear. They'll put me in foster care, she said. That's what happened to my friend Maya. Her mama went to jail, and they put Maya in a house with strangers. She said it was awful. She said the people were mean, and the food was bad, and she cried every night. Frank felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The child was probably right. Without a parent or guardian, she would be taken into state custody. And while the foster system could be a lifeline for some children, it could also be a nightmare for others. He thought about his options. He was a trucker, not a social worker. He had no legal right to this child, no authority to make decisions about her future. The responsible thing to do was to wait for the deputy and let the system take over. But the system had already failed Lily so many times. Her father had walked away. Her mother had chosen drugs over her daughter. Teachers and neighbors and everyone else had seen the signs and done nothing, or not enough. Sometimes, Frank thought, the responsible thing and the right thing were not the same thing. Lily, he said slowly, measuring each word, I have an idea, but before I tell you, I need you to understand something. I'm not your daddy, and I'm not trying to be. I'm just a tired old trucker who stumbled into your life at a gas station, but I made you a promise that I wouldn't leave you alone, and I meant it. Lily watched him with wide eyes, barely breathing. My truck is headed west, Frank continued. Sacramento first, then north toward Oregon. If you wanted, you could come with me. We could try to find your grandma together. But this is your choice, Lily. I won't force you to do anything. If you want to wait for the deputy, I'll stay with you until they get here. If you want to come with me, I'll do everything I can to get you to your grandma safely. The words hung in the air between them. Frank knew he was offering something that could get him in serious trouble. Taking a child across state lines without authorization was not something the law looked kindly upon. But as he watched Lily's face transform from fear to hope, he knew he was making the right choice. You would really do that? Lily asked. Take me to find my grandma? I would. But what about your job? Won't you get in trouble? Frank smiled. I'm old enough that getting in trouble doesn't scare me much anymore. Besides, I was planning to retire soon anyway. This seems like a good reason to speed up the timeline. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers still wrapped around the lily pendant. Then she looked up at Frank with an expression of fierce determination that seemed to add years to her young face. I want to go with you, she said. I want to find my grandma. Frank nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a familiar coat. Then that's what we'll do. He signaled for the waitress and paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for her kindness. As they stood to leave, Lily slipped her hand into his, her small fingers gripping his calloused palm with surprising strength. "Frank," she said quietly as they walked toward the door. "Yeah, kiddo. Thank you for not leaving me." Frank squeezed her hand gently. "We're in this together now, Lily. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The night air was cold as they stepped outside, but the sky was brilliant with stars. Frank helped Lily climb into the cab of the Kenworth, showing her how to use the step and grab bar. She looked around at the interior with wide eyes, taking in the gauges and switches and the small sleeping berth behind the seats. "You live in here?" she asked. "Sometimes," Frank said, "when I'm on long hauls. It's not fancy, but it's home." He started the engine, feeling the familiar rumble vibrate through the cab. Lily watched the process with fascination, her fear temporarily forgotten in the novelty of the experience. "We're going to Sacramento first," Frank explained as he guided the truck onto the highway. "I have to deliver my load. That'll take a few hours. Then we'll head north." "How far is Ashland?" "About 7 hours from Sacramento, depending on traffic. We should get there by tomorrow afternoon." Lily nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The highway stretched before them, a river of darkness punctuated by occasional headlights. Frank kept the radio low, tuned to a country station playing old songs from a gentler time. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the miles slipping away beneath them. Frank kept one eye on the road and one on Lily, watching as her eyelids grew heavy and her head began to nod. "There's a blanket in the back," he said gently. "You can curl up and sleep if you want. I'll wake you when we get to Sacramento." Lily shook her head stubbornly. "I want to stay awake." "I want to help you drive," Frank smiled. "How about a compromise? You can be my co-pilot. That means you watch for interesting things along the road and keep me company. But if you get tired, you can rest. Co-pilots need their sleep too." "Okay," Lily agreed. "What kind of interesting things?" "Oh, all kinds. Unusual signs. Animals crossing the road. Other trucks with cool designs. Anything that catches your eye." Lily peered out the window with renewed interest, scanning the darkness for something noteworthy. Frank felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he had almost forgotten. This was what it meant to have someone to care for, someone who counted on you. They drove through the night, Lily drifting in and out of sleep, despite her best efforts to stay awake. Frank stopped once for fuel and coffee, carrying Lily into the truck stop, still wrapped in her blanket, so she would not have to walk through the cold. She woke briefly, looked around with confused eyes, then nestled back into sleep like a baby bird, returning to its nest. Dawn was breaking over the Sierra Nevada when they descended into the Sacramento Valley. The sky turned from black to purple to pink, and Lily woke to see the sunrise painting the mountains in shades of gold. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "One of the best parts of this job," Frank agreed. "Seeing the sun come up over different parts of the country. Every sunrise is different." They reached the distribution center by 7, and Frank made his delivery while Lily waited in the truck. Strict instructions to lock the doors and not open them for anyone but him. When he returned, she was exactly where he had left her, clutching the blanket and watching the activity in the yard with wide eyes. "All done," Frank announced, climbing back into the cab. "Now we head north." The drive to Ashland took longer than expected. There was construction on Interstate 5, and they hit traffic near Redding. But the delays gave them time to talk, to share stories and learn about each other. Frank told Lily about Martha, about their life together, and the garden she had loved. He told her about his years on the road, the places he had seen, and the people he had met. He told her about the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the freedom of the open highway, the peace that came with knowing your place in the world. Lily, in turn, told him about her life before everything fell apart, about the apartment they used to have with the yellow kitchen and the cat named Whiskers who had run away. About her daddy, who used to carry her on his shoulders and make her laugh by pretending to be a monster. About her mama before the pills, when she was happy and whole and the best mother in the world. It was not all sadness. Lily remembered birthday parties and trips to the beach, bedtime stories and Sunday pancakes. The good memories were there, buried beneath the pain, waiting to be rediscovered. As they crossed into Oregon, Frank noticed Lily growing quieter, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape with an expression of intense longing. "Nervous?" he asked. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" Lily said quietly. "It's been 2 years. I was just a little kid when I saw her last." "You're still a little kid," Frank pointed out gently, "and grandmas have a way of recognizing their grandchildren, no matter how much they've grown. It's like a superpower." Lily managed a small smile. "You think grandmas have superpowers?" "I know they do. Martha's mother could make the best apple pie you ever tasted, and she always knew when someone was lying. That's definitely a superpower." The town of Ashland appeared before them, nestled in the hills of southern Oregon. It was a charming place, with tree-lined streets and historic buildings and a theatrical charm that came from hosting the famous Shakespeare Festival. Frank guided the truck through the narrow streets, drawing curious looks from pedestrians unaccustomed to seeing an 18-wheeler in their quaint downtown. "Now," Frank said, "we need to find a blue house with an oak tree. Any ideas where to start?" Lily pressed her face against the window, scanning the passing houses. "I remember it was near a park," she said, "with a playground that had a big slide." "That's helpful. Let's find a park." They drove slowly through the residential neighborhoods, searching for playgrounds. Lily directed them with increasing confidence, her memories coming back as she recognized familiar landmarks. "Turn left here," she said suddenly. "I remember that church. Grandma used to take me to the Easter egg hunt." Frank turned, and there it was. A small park with a playground, and across the street a blue house with a massive oak tree in the front yard. The tree was bare now, its branches reaching toward the winter sky like skeletal fingers, but there was no mistaking it. "That's it," Lily breathed. "That's Grandma's house." Frank pulled the truck to the curb, the engine idling as they both stared at the house. It was well maintained, with a neat lawn and flower boxes in the windows. A wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone was home. "Are you ready?" Frank asked. Lily's hands were shaking. What if she's not there? What if she moved away? Only one way to find out. They climbed down from the truck together, Lily's hand finding Frank's as they walked up the path to the front door. Her grip was so tight it was almost painful, but Frank did not pull away. At the door, Lily hesitated. Frank reached out and rang the bell. For a long moment nothing happened. Then footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal an elderly woman with silver hair and blue eyes that went wide with shock. She looked at Lily, and her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, and her whole body began to tremble. "Lily," she whispered, "is that really you?" Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, Grandma." Rose Bennett fell to her knees, pulling Lily into an embrace so fierce it seemed she would never let go. She was sobbing openly now, her face buried in Lily's tangled hair, her hands clutching the back of the pink jacket as if afraid her granddaughter might disappear again. "My baby," she kept saying, "my sweet baby. I've been so worried. I've been looking everywhere. I never stopped looking." Frank stepped back, giving them space. He watched the reunion with a full heart, knowing that he had done the right thing. Whatever trouble might come his way, whatever consequences he might face, this moment made it all worthwhile. After what felt like an eternity, Rose looked up, noticing Frank for the first time. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her gaze was sharp and assessing. "Who are you?" she asked, her arm still tight around Lily. Lily answered before Frank could speak. "This is my friend Frank, Grandma. He brought me to you. I was all alone at a gas station, and he found me. He promised he wouldn't leave me, and he didn't. He drove me all the way from Nevada." Rose stared at Frank, processing this information. Then she stood, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder, and extended the other to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been searching for Lily for 2 years. Her mother took her away and wouldn't tell me where they were. I hired private investigators. I contacted the police. I did everything I could think of. And now you just bring her to my door, like an answered prayer." Frank shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip despite her age. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he said. "Lily did most of the work. She remembered your address." Rose looked down at her granddaughter with eyes full of love. "My clever girl. I always knew you'd find your way back to me." They went inside, where Rose made tea and insisted Frank stay for a proper meal. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with photographs and handmade quilts and the smell of cinnamon. Lily explored each room with wonder, rediscovering the home she had been taken from. Over dinner, Rose explained the situation. Lily's mother, her daughter Jennifer, had struggled with addiction for years. When Rose had tried to intervene, threatening to seek custody of Lily, Jennifer had panicked and run, taking Lily with her. Since then, Rose had been fighting a legal battle to get her granddaughter back. But without knowing where Jennifer and Lily were, the courts could do nothing. "What about Jennifer?" Rose asked carefully. "Where is she now?" Lily's face fell. "She left me at the gas station. She said she'd be right back, but she never came." Rose closed her eyes, pain etching deep lines in her face. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Your mother loves you, but she's sick. The addiction makes her do things she wouldn't normally do." "Is she going to get better?" Lily asked. "I hope so," Rose said honestly. "I hope that one day she gets the help she needs and comes back to us. But until then, you're staying with me, if that's what you want." Lily threw herself into her grandmother's arms. "It's what I want," she said, "more than anything." Frank watched the reunion with a quiet satisfaction. He had done what he set out to do. Lily was safe, loved, and home. His part in the story was coming to an end. "I should probably get going," he said, rising from the table. "It's a long drive back, and I need to figure out some things." Rose stood as well, her face full of concern. "Where will you go?" Frank shrugged. "Back to Nevada, I suppose." "Then Reno. I've got a house there, though it's been empty for a while." "You should stay," Lily said suddenly. Her eyes were wide and earnest. "At least for tonight. You've been driving forever. You must be tired." Frank looked at Rose, who nodded immediately. "She's right. It's the least I can do after what you've done for us. I have a guest room. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable. I don't want to impose." "It's not imposing," Rose said firmly. "It's called accepting help, something you're clearly not very good at." Frank chuckled, surprised by her directness. "That obvious, huh? Takes one to know one. Now sit back down and have some more pot roast. You look like you haven't had a home-cooked meal in months." She was right about that too. Frank sat back down and let himself be fed, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a very long time. That night, in the guest room of Rose Bennett's blue house, Frank lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The room was comfortable, the bed soft, but his mind would not quiet down. He thought about the last few days, about the choice he had made, and the consequences that might follow. He had technically taken a child without authorization. Even if his intentions were good, even if the outcome was positive, the law did not always see things the same way. He should probably call a lawyer. Maybe turn himself in to the local police and explain the situation. But even as he considered these options, he knew he would not change anything. Given the same circumstances, he would make the same choice every time. Some things were more important than following rules. A soft knock came at his door. Frank sat up as it creaked open, revealing Lily in a borrowed nightgown that was too big for her, her face uncertain in the dim light from the hallway. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Can I come in?" Frank nodded, and Lily padded across the room, climbing onto the bed beside him. She was clutching a stuffed bear that Rose had kept from her last visit, waiting for her return. "I keep thinking about my mama," Lily said quietly. "I wonder where she is. If she's okay." Frank put his arm around her, feeling her lean into his side. I'm sure she's thinking about you too, he said. Even when people make bad choices, they still love their families. Do you think she'll ever come back? I don't know, Lily, but I do know that whatever happens, you've got a good life ahead of you. Your grandma loves you. You're going to grow up strong and smart and kind, and someday maybe you'll understand your mama better than you do now. Lily was quiet for a moment. Frank, she said, can I ask you for something? Of course. When you leave tomorrow, can I have your phone number, in case I need to talk to someone who understands? Frank felt his heart swell. I'll do you one better, he said. I'll write you letters, real ones, on paper that you can keep, and I'll visit whenever I'm passing through Oregon. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Lily smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since they met. Promise? Promise. She fell asleep beside him, her small body curled up like a cat, the stuffed bear clutched to her chest. Frank watched her sleep, marveling at the resilience of children, at their capacity to hope even when hope seemed impossible. In the morning, Rose made pancakes shaped like animals, just like Lily had described from her early childhood. Lily ate 3 of them, laughing as she identified each shape, and Frank felt something unlock in his heart that had been sealed away since Martha's death. After breakfast, it was time to go. Frank had a truck to return, a life to sort out, responsibilities that could not be ignored forever. But he made good on his promise, writing down his phone number and address for Lily and promising to write his first letter as soon as he got home. At the door, Rose pulled him aside while Lily finished getting dressed. I meant what I said last night, she said quietly. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. You already did, Frank said. Just seeing her with you, knowing she's safe and loved, that's all the thanks I need. Rose studied his face with those sharp blue eyes. You're a good man, Frank Morrison, a rare thing in this world. Just a trucker, Frank said. In the right place at the right time. Rose shook her head. No, you're more than that. You're the answer to a grandmother's prayer. Lily appeared behind them, her hair brushed and her face clean, wearing clothes that Rose had kept from 2 years ago, still perfectly sized. She threw herself at Frank, wrapping her arms around his waist and holding on tight. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Frank hugged her back, feeling tears prick at his eyes. Thank you, Lily, for reminding an old man what's important. He climbed into his truck and started the engine, looking back at the blue house with the oak tree. Rose and Lily stood on the porch, waving, their figures growing smaller as he pulled away. The highway stretched before him, familiar and endless. But something had changed. The road no longer felt like an escape or an obligation. It felt like a path leading him somewhere new. Frank thought about the empty house in Reno, the silent rooms and dusty furniture. Maybe it was time to fill that house with something other than memories. Maybe it was time to build a new life, one with room for connections and purpose and love. He smiled as he drove, thinking about Lily and Rose, about the unexpected gift of a child's trust. He had set out to grant a little girl's last wish, to reunite her with her grandmother. But in the process, she had granted him something too. A reason to believe that it was not too late to start over, a reminder that family could be found in the most unexpected places, a hope for a future he had stopped imagining. The miles rolled by, and Frank Morrison drove on, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the greatest gifts come in the smallest packages, and sometimes all it takes to change a life is a simple act of kindness. Weeks later, a letter arrived at Rose Bennett's blue house. It was addressed to Lily, written in a careful hand on lined paper. Dear Lily, I made it home safe. The house was dusty, but I cleaned it up. Martha's garden is overgrown, but I think I'll try to bring it back to life this spring. She would have liked that. I've been thinking about what you asked me at the gas station. You asked if I could help you find your grandma, but looking back, I realize you were asking for something much bigger. You were asking if anyone in the world cared enough to help. The answer is yes, Lily, people care, more than you might think. Sometimes they're just afraid to show it, or they don't know how. But when you need help, don't be afraid to ask. You never know who might be listening. I'm going to retire from trucking. I've been doing it for too long, and it's time for something new. I don't know what that something is yet, but I'm excited to find out. You taught me that it's never too late to change your story. Your grandma tells me you've started school, and you're doing great. I knew you would. You're the bravest kid I've ever met. I'll be passing through Oregon next month. Maybe we can get ice cream, and you can tell me about your classes. I'd like that. Take care of yourself and your grandma, and remember what I told you. You're not alone. You never were. Your friend, Frank Lilly, read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in a wooden box Rose had given her. It was the first of many letters, each one treasured, each one a reminder of the night when a tired old trucker had stopped at a gas station and changed her life forever. Years later, Lily would tell the story to her own children. About the night she was abandoned, the fear she had felt, the man who appeared like an unexpected friend in trucker's clothing. She would tell them about the long drive through the night, the sunrise over the mountains, the moment she saw her grandmother's face, and she would tell them the most important part, the part about asking for help, about trusting someone enough to let them in, about the unexpected places where family could be found. "Can you help me find my grandma?" she had asked. A simple wish, spoken in desperation to a stranger in a truck stop, and Frank Morrison, retired trucker, had answered yes. That was the wish that shocked everyone. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was so ordinary. A child wanting to go home, a grandmother waiting with open arms, and in between, a man who chose to help when he could have walked away. Sometimes the most shocking thing of all is simple human kindness, and sometimes that's exactly what saves us. In Reno, Frank worked in his garden, coaxing Martha's roses back to life. The house was no longer silent. He had adopted a dog from the local shelter, a scruffy mutt named Riley, who followed him everywhere. He volunteered at a youth center downtown, mentoring kids who reminded him of Lily, and every few months he made the drive to Ashland, where a little girl and her grandmother waited to welcome him home. Home, a word he had almost forgotten the meaning of. But now he understood. Home was not a place. It was the people who loved you, who chose you, who showed up when you needed them most. Frank had found his home in the most unlikely way, at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, in the eyes of an abandoned child, in the simple act of saying yes. And he would never let it go. Rose Bennett watched from her window as Frank's truck pulled into the driveway for what must have been the 20th visit. Lily was already running across the lawn, her braids flying behind her, her face split with a grin that never failed to make Rose's heart swell. She thought about the night 2 years ago when the doorbell had rung and her granddaughter had appeared like a miracle on her doorstep. She thought about the man who had brought her, who had risked everything to reunite a family he had no connection to. "There are still good people in this world," Rose murmured to herself, "and sometimes they drive trucks." She went to the kitchen to put on coffee and start dinner. There was a pot roast in the oven, Frank's favorite. Outside, she could hear Lily's laughter and Frank's deep voice, the sounds of a family coming together. It was not the family she had expected, not the one she had planned or imagined in her younger days. But it was her family nonetheless, chosen and cherished and more precious than anything she had ever known. The door opened and they came in together, Lily chattering about school and Frank carrying a box that he said was a surprise. Rose hugged them both, breathing in the scent of cold air and joy. "Welcome home," she said, and she meant it with all her heart. The story of how a trucker granted the last wish of an abandoned child at a gas station would be told for years to come. It would be shared at family dinners and school presentations, at church gatherings and community events. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was not about the dramatic rescue or the long drive through the night. It was about what came after, about the letters and visits, the holidays and birthdays, the slow building of a bond that transcended blood and obligation. It was about choosing to show up again and again for the people who needed you. It was about finding family in unexpected places. It was about the courage to ask for help and the grace to accept it. And it was about an old trucker who learned, at the age of 58, that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Frank Morrison drove on, through the years and the miles, carrying with him the knowledge that one moment of kindness could change everything. And in a blue house in Ashland, Oregon, a little girl grew up surrounded by love, never forgetting the man who had saved her life with a simple promise. "I won't leave you alone." He never did. And that made all the difference. The seasons turned in Ashland, painting the oak tree in Rose's front yard with different colors through the years. Spring brought delicate green buds and the sound of Lily laughing as she chased butterflies through the garden. Summer meant long days of ice cream and swimming at the local pool, with Frank visiting every few weeks to teach Lily how to fish in the nearby streams. Autumn covered the yard in golden leaves that Lily and Frank would rake into enormous piles before jumping into them like children. And winter brought cozy evenings by the fire, hot chocolate, and stories of all the places Frank had seen in his years on the road. Lily thrived in ways no one could have predicted. The frightened girl who had huddled in a truck stop booth, waiting for a mother who would never return, blossomed into a confident young woman. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and discovered a love of reading that led her to devour every book in the local library. Rose enrolled her in art classes, where she showed a natural talent for painting, capturing the landscapes of Oregon with colors that seemed to glow from within. Frank kept every letter Lily sent him, storing them in a shoebox under his bed like treasures. Her handwriting evolved from the careful printing of a child to the flowing script of a teenager, documenting her growth in ink and paper. She wrote about her first day at middle school, about the boy who sat next to her in math class, about the time she won second place in the county science fair. She wrote about her fears and her dreams, her struggles and her triumphs, trusting Frank with the contents of her heart. And Frank wrote back. He told her about his garden, which had become the envy of the neighborhood. He told her about Riley, who had learned to fetch the newspaper and terrorize squirrels with equal enthusiasm. He told her about the volunteer work he did at the youth center, helping kids who reminded him of her, hoping to be for them what he had been for Lily. When Lily turned 13, Frank drove up from Reno with a special present. It was a journal, leather-bound and embossed with a lily flower on the cover. "For all the stories you have yet to tell," he said as she unwrapped it. Lily hugged him so hard he could barely breathe. "I love it," she whispered. "I love you." It was the first time either of them had said those words out loud, but they had been true for years. "I love you too, kiddo," Frank said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you'll ever know." Rose watched them from the kitchen window, tears streaming down her face. She'd never expected to find family in an old trucker, but life had a way of surprising you. Frank had become the father figure Lily needed, the steady presence that anchored her to the world. And for Frank, Lily and Rose had become the family he had lost hope of ever having. They filled the empty spaces in his heart, gave meaning to his days, turned his house back into a home. Time passed, as it always does. Lily graduated from high school at the top of her class, giving a speech about the importance of kindness and the unexpected places where love could be found. Frank sat in the front row next to Rose, tears of pride streaming down his weathered face. "She's going places," Rose whispered to him. "Look at her shine." Frank could only nod, too overcome to speak. Lily went to college, studying social work because she wanted to help children like herself. Kids who had been failed by the system, abandoned by parents, left to fend for themselves. She interned at foster care agencies and advocacy groups, learning the ins and outs of a system she had narrowly escaped. "I want to be the person I needed when I was 8, she told Frank during one of their regular phone calls. "I want to be the one who doesn't walk away." "You already are," Frank told her. "You've been that person since the night you trusted a stranger in a truck stop. That took more courage than most adults have in their entire lives." After graduation, Lily took a job in Portland, close enough to visit Rose regularly, but far enough to build her own life. She worked with at-risk youth, specializing in cases of parental abandonment. Her colleagues marveled at her ability to connect with the most withdrawn children, to break through walls that seemed impenetrable. She understood them because she had been them. She knew the fear and the hope, the desperate wish for someone to care. And she gave them what Frank had given her, the gift of being seen, of being valued, of being worth saving. Frank continued to visit even as his own health began to decline. The years of trucking had taken their toll on his body, leaving him with a bad back and knees that ached in cold weather. But he never missed an important occasion. Birthdays, holidays, promotions, he was there for all of them as reliably as the sunrise. On Lily's 30th birthday, Frank gave her another gift. It was a small jewelry box, and inside was a pendant shaped like a truck crafted in silver. "So you never forget where you came from," he said. Lily laughed through her tears, holding it next to the lily pendant that still hung around her neck. "I could never forget," she said. "That night changed everything." "It changed everything for me too," Frank admitted. "You saved me as much as I saved you." They sat together on Rose's porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Rose was inside, preparing dinner, humming a song from her youth. The oak tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, its leaves rustling like whispered secrets. "Frank," Lily said quietly, "can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? Taking me with you that night? It could have gone so wrong." Frank was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "No," he said finally, "not for a second. You were the best decision I ever made. You taught me what family really means. Not blood, not obligation. Just showing up for someone day after day, choosing to love them." Lily reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for letting me," Frank replied. The years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to their story. Rose passed away peacefully at the age of 87, surrounded by Lily and Frank and the love that had sustained them all. Lily inherited the blue house, keeping it exactly as Rose had left it, a shrine to the woman who had never stopped fighting for her granddaughter. Frank lived to see Lily marry a kind man named Michael, who worked as a teacher. He danced at their wedding, despite his aching knees, tears of joy streaming down his face. And when their first child was born, a boy with Lily's dark eyes and Michael's gentle smile, they named him Frank. "For the trucker who changed everything," Lily explained, placing the baby in Frank's arms. "For the man who stopped when everyone else walked away." Frank held his namesake, marveling at the miracle of new life. The baby yawned and stretched, tiny fingers wrapping around Frank's calloused thumb. "Hey there, little guy," Frank whispered. "Welcome to the family." And it was a family. Not the one Frank had expected to have, not the one he had dreamed of in his younger days. But it was real, and it was his, built on a foundation of kindness and sustained by love. The story of how a trucker granted the last wish of an abandoned child at a gas station lived on through generations. Little Frank grew up hearing it, then his children after him, then their children too. It became part of the family legend, a reminder of where they came from and what they stood for. "Ask for help when you need it," Lily told them, "and never walk away from someone who needs you." Simple lessons from a complicated night. Simple truths that changed the world, one person at a time. And somewhere, on the highways of America, other truckers made the same choice Frank had made. They stopped when they saw someone in need. They offered help instead of walking away. They remembered that every stranger was someone's child, someone's hope, someone's prayer waiting to be answered. Because that was the real legacy of Frank Morrison. Not the miles he had driven or the loads he had hauled, but the moment he had chosen kindness over convenience, connection over isolation, love over fear. One decision, one night, one little girl asking a simple question. "Can you help me find my grandma?" Yes. That single word had changed everything, and it would keep changing everything for as long as there were children in need and strangers willing to help, for as long as there was love in the world. Forever. 5 years after that first meeting, on a cold December evening, Frank received a phone call that would add another chapter to their story. It was Rose, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "Frank," she said, "Jennifer called. Lily's mother. She's in a rehabilitation center in Sacramento. She's been clean for 8 months. She wants to see Lily." Frank felt his heart skip a beat. He had always known this day might come, had prepared himself for it in the quiet hours of the night. But now that it was here, he did not know what to feel. "What does Lily want?" he asked. "She's scared," Rose admitted, "but she wants to go. She says she needs to understand why her mother did what she did. She needs closure, one way or another." Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll drive her, if she wants me to." "She wants you to," Rose said, relief flooding her voice. "She said she couldn't do it without you." 3 days later, Frank pulled his truck into the driveway of the Blue House. Lily was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a heavy coat, her face pale with anxiety. She was 15 now, taller and more mature, but in that moment she looked exactly like the scared little girl he had met at the gas station all those years ago. "You okay, kiddo?" Frank asked as she climbed into the cab. Lily shook her head. "No, but I need to do this." The drive to Sacramento took 6 hours. They talked for most of it, Lily's questions tumbling out in a nervous stream. "What if she doesn't recognize me? What if she's different? What if she's the same? What if she wants me to come back to her?" Frank answered as best he could, though he had no real answers. All he could offer was his presence, his support, and his promise to be there no matter what happened. The rehabilitation center was a clean, modern building on the outskirts of the city. Frank parked the truck and walked Lily to the entrance, his hand on her shoulder. "I'll be right here," he said. "Take as long as you need. I'm not going anywhere." Lily looked at him with eyes full of gratitude and fear. "Thank you, Frank, for everything." "Go," he said gently. "Go get your answers." She disappeared through the doors, and Frank sat down on a bench outside to wait. The afternoon sun was warm on his face, and he closed his eyes, letting his mind drift to memories of Martha and all the things he wished he could have said to her before she died. 2 hours passed, then 3. Frank began to worry, but he forced himself to stay calm. Some things took time. Some wounds needed careful attention before they could heal. Finally, the doors opened and Lily emerged. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was something different in her expression, a lightness that had not been there before. A weight lifted from her young shoulders. She walked straight to Frank and threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. He held her tight, stroking her hair, letting her cry. "She's sorry," Lily finally managed. "She's really, really sorry. She said she never stopped loving me, even when the drugs made her do terrible things. She said leaving me at that gas station was the worst thing she's ever done, and she thinks about it every single day." Frank nodded, saying nothing. Sometimes the best thing you could do was just listen. "She asked if she could write to me," Lily continued. "She said she understands if I don't want to, but she hopes maybe someday we can have a relationship. Not like before. Just something." "What did you tell her?" Frank asked. Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I told her I needed time to think about it, to figure out what I want. But I also told her that I'm okay, that Grandma takes good care of me, and that I have a friend who's like a father to me. I told her about you, Frank, about how you saved me." "What did she say?" Lily smiled through her tears. "She said thank you. She said she's grateful that I found you, that someone was there to help when she couldn't be." Frank felt something loosen in his chest. He had not realized he had been holding tension about Jennifer, worrying about what her return might mean for his relationship with Lily. But hearing that she was grateful, that she understood his role in Lily's life, brought a peace he had not expected. "How do you feel?" he asked. Lily thought for a moment. "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying a heavy backpack for years, and I finally got to set it down." I don't know what's going to happen with my mom, but at least now I understand. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just sick and she didn't know how to get better. That's very mature of you, Frank said. Most adults never figure that out. Lily shrugged. I had good teachers. They drove back to Ashland in comfortable silence, stopping once for burgers and milkshakes at a roadside diner. The sun was setting as they pulled into Rose's driveway, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Frank of that first evening at the Desert Rose truck stop. Rose met them at the door, searching Lily's face for clues about how it had gone. Lily hugged her grandmother tightly and said, "It's going to be okay, Grandma. Everything's going to be okay." And it was. Jennifer did write. Careful letters full of apologies and explanations, and slowly building hope. Lily wrote back, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness as the months passed. By the time she turned 18, they had developed a fragile but real relationship, one built on honesty instead of desperation. Jennifer never tried to reclaim the role of mother. She understood that too much damage had been done, too much trust had been broken. But she became something else, a friend, an advisor, a voice on the phone when Lily needed to talk. She stayed clean, got a job as a counselor at the same rehabilitation center where she had found recovery, and dedicated her life to helping others escape the trap that had nearly destroyed her. It was not the happy ending that movies promised. It was messier, more complicated, filled with setbacks and difficult conversations. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that made it precious beyond measure. Frank watched it all unfold with quiet pride. He had given Lily the chance to find her grandmother, but she had done the hard work of building a life. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. That's what he told the kids at the youth center when they asked for advice. Don't let your past define your future, he would say. You get to write your own story. And if you need help, don't be afraid to ask. You never know who might be listening. The kids listened because Frank was not just talking. He had lived it. He had been the answer to a little girl's desperate wish, and in doing so, he had found answers to questions he had not even known he was asking. What is the meaning of life? Connection, family, love. Simple answers to complicated questions. But sometimes, simple was enough. On his 70th birthday, Frank Morrison sat on the porch of the Blue House in Ashland, surrounded by the people who had become his family. Lily was there with Michael and little Frank, who was not so little anymore at 7 years old. Rose's memory lived on in the photographs that lined the walls and the recipes that Lily had inherited. Jennifer called to wish him a happy birthday, her voice warm with gratitude. Frank looked at the oak tree in the front yard, now in full summer glory, its leaves rustling in the warm breeze. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the winding road from a truck stop in Nevada to this porch in Oregon. He thought about Martha, about how proud she would have been to see the family he had built. He thought about all the miles he had driven, all the loads he had hauled, all the years he had spent running from the very things that now gave his life meaning. And he thought about Lily, about the night she had looked up at him with desperate eyes and asked a question that changed everything. "Can you help me find my grandma?" Yes, one word. One choice, one moment of kindness that had rippled outward through the years, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. Little Frank climbed onto his grandfather's lap, looking up with eyes full of curiosity. "Grandpa Frank," he said, "tell me the story again, about how you found Mommy at the gas station." Frank smiled, settling the boy more comfortably against his chest. "It was a dark and stormy night," he began, and the words flowed easily, polished by years of retelling. Lily listened from the doorway, leaning against Michael's shoulder, tears in her eyes. She had heard the story 100 times, but it never failed to move her. It was the story of her life, of her second chance, of the man who had given her everything by simply refusing to walk away. "I love you, Frank," she mouthed silently. "I love you too," he mouthed back, and the story continued, as it always would, passed down through generations like the most precious inheritance. Not money or property or possessions, but something far more valuable: hope, connection, family, love, the things that truly mattered, the things that lasted forever. Frank Morrison finished the story, hugged his grandson, and looked out at the world with grateful eyes. He had not asked for this life. He had not expected it or planned for it or even believed it was possible, but he had said yes when it mattered most, and that had made all the difference. The sun set over Ashland, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The oak trees swayed in the evening breeze, and somewhere on the highways of America, other truckers drove on, carrying their loads toward distant destinations, not knowing that around the next bend, at the next gas station, in the next unexpected moment, their lives might change forever. All they had to do was stop. All they had to do was ask. All they had to do was say yes, and everything could be different. That was the lesson Frank Morrison had learned at the age of 58. That was the gift he passed on to everyone he met. That was the story that would live on, long after the truck had made its final journey and the driver had found his rest. One moment of kindness, one life transformed, one endless ripple of love, forever and ever, the end. But every ending is also a beginning. 10 years after Frank Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Lily stood at a podium in Sacramento, California, accepting an award for her lifetime of service to abandoned and at-risk children. The auditorium was packed with social workers, foster parents, legislators, and most importantly, the children and families whose lives she had touched. She was 50 years old now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. Michael sat in the front row, grey-haired and proud, their son Frank beside him with his own wife and 2 children. Jennifer was there too, frail but smiling, having beaten the odds to survive into her 70s. Lily looked out at the crowd and took a deep breath. "When I was 8 years old," she began, "I was abandoned at a gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert. My mother was struggling with addiction, and she made a choice that night that could have destroyed both of our lives. I sat in that truck stop for almost 20 hours, waiting for her to come back, believing with all my heart that she would. She didn't. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But someone else did. A truck driver named Frank Morrison stopped for coffee and a cheeseburger. He saw a scared little girl in a corner booth, and he made a different choice. He chose to sit down. He chose to share his food. He chose to listen. And when I asked him if he could help me find my grandmother, he chose to say yes." Lily paused, her eyes glistening with tears. That one word changed everything. Yes. Such a small word, such a simple thing to say, but it meant that I got to grow up in a loving home instead of being lost in a system that was already stretched too thin. It meant that I got to know my grandmother, who taught me what unconditional love looked like. It meant that I eventually got to reconcile with my mother, who fought her way back from the darkness and dedicated the rest of her life to helping others. She looked at Jennifer, who was wiping tears from her own eyes, and it meant that I found a father. Not the one I was born to, but the one who chose me. Frank Morrison didn't have to stop that night. He didn't have to get involved. He could have finished his coffee and driven away, and no one would have blamed him. But he didn't. He saw a child in need, and he responded with kindness. Lily held up the award, a crystal sculpture shaped like 2 hands reaching toward each other. "I'm accepting this award in his name. Not because I've done anything special, but because everything I've accomplished has been built on the foundation he laid. Every child I've helped, every family I've reunited, every life I've touched, it all goes back to that night in the desert when a tired old trucker decided that one little girl was worth stopping for." She set the award down and gripped the podium with both hands. I know there are people in this room tonight who have made the same choice Frank made. Foster parents who opened their homes to children who weren't their own. Social workers who went above and beyond to keep families together. Teachers who noticed when a child was hungry or scared or hurt. Neighbors who spoke up when they saw something wrong. You are the Frank Morrisons of the world, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart." The applause began, scattered at first, then building to a thunderous crescendo. People rose to their feet, some of them crying, all of them moved by her words. But Lily wasn't finished. She held up her hand for silence, and the room gradually quieted. "I want to tell you one more thing," she said. "Something Frank told me on his 75th birthday when I asked him what he had learned from our journey together." She smiled at the memory. He said, "Lily, I spent 30 years driving past people who needed help. I told myself it wasn't my business, that someone else would take care of it, that I had my own problems to worry about. And then I met you, and I realized that every person I drove past was someone's you. Someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's hope for the future. I can't go back and help all of them, but I can make sure I never drive past again." Lily looked out at the audience, her gaze steady and strong. "That's what I'm asking you to do tonight. Don't drive past. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Don't tell yourself it's not your business, because every child in need is someone's hope for the future, and you might be the only one who stops." She picked up the award again, holding it high. "This is for Frank Morrison, for the man who stopped, for the man who said yes, for the man who showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. And for everyone who has ever made the same choice, thank you. Thank you for not driving past. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for believing we were worth saving." The applause was deafening now, a wave of sound that washed over Lily and carried her back to that night in the desert, to the fluorescent lights and the cracked vinyl booth and the tired old trucker who had changed everything. She closed her eyes and felt Frank's presence, as real and solid as it had ever been. "I did good, Frank," she whispered. "I hope I made you proud." And somewhere she knew he was smiling. After the ceremony, Lily found herself surrounded by well-wishers, but she made her way through the crowd to her family. Little Frank, who was not so little anymore at 32, pulled her into a hug. "That was beautiful, Mom," he said. "Grandpa Frank would have loved it." Lily smiled. "He would have been embarrassed by all the attention," she said, but secretly pleased. Michael kissed her cheek. "You were amazing up there, as always." "I had a good story to tell," Lily said. "The best story." They walked out of the auditorium together into the cool California night. The stars were bright overhead, the same stars that had witnessed that first journey from Nevada to Oregon so many years ago. Lily looked up at them and thought about all the miles that had passed beneath Frank's wheels, all the sunrises he had seen, all the lives he had touched without even knowing it. She thought about the blue house in Ashland, now belonging to her son and his family, the oak tree still standing sentinel in the front yard. She thought about Rose, gone now for 15 years, and Jennifer, frail but still fighting, and all the other people who had shaped her into the woman she had become. Most of all, she thought about Frank, about his weathered face and kind eyes, his calloused hands and gentle voice, about the way he had sat down across from a scared little girl and offered her a cheeseburger like it was the most natural thing in the world. She reached up and touched the two pendants she still wore around her neck, the lily from her grandmother and the truck from Frank. They clinked softly together, a small sound that carried the weight of decades. "Mom?" Her son's voice broke through her reverie. "You okay?" Lily smiled, blinking back tears. "I'm perfect," she said. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "We're the lucky ones," her son said. "We got you." They walked to the car together, 3 generations of a family that had been built on a foundation of kindness. Lily's grandchildren, twins named Rose and Martha after the women who had shaped their history, chatted excitedly about the ceremony, about the award, about the speech their grandmother had given. Lily listened and smiled, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. This was Frank's legacy, she realized. Not the miles he had driven or the loads he had hauled, but this family, this love, this endless ripple of kindness that kept spreading outward, touching lives he would never know. She thought about all the truck drivers out there tonight, driving through the darkness, passing gas stations and rest stops, and all the lonely places where people in need might be waiting. She hoped some of them would stop. She hoped some of them would see a scared child or a struggling mother or a lost soul and make the choice to help, because that was how the world got better, not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through small moments of kindness, through the simple decision to stop instead of driving past, through the courage to say yes when it would have been easier to say no. Frank had taught her that, and she had spent her life passing the lesson on. As they drove home through the night, Lily's granddaughter Rose leaned forward from the back seat. "Grandma," she said, "tell us the story again about the trucker and the gas station." Lily laughed. "You've heard that story 100 times. "But I like it," Rose insisted. "It makes me feel brave." Lily looked at Michael, who smiled and nodded. She turned to face her grandchildren, their eager faces illuminated by the passing streetlights. "It was a dark and stormy night," she began, and the familiar words wrapped around her like a warm blanket. "There was a truck stop in the middle of the Nevada desert, and a little girl was sitting all alone in a corner booth." The story unfolded as it always did, but this time Lily noticed something new. Her grandchildren weren't just listening passively. They were leaning forward, their eyes bright with understanding, absorbing the lesson at the heart of the tale. Be kind, be brave, say yes. That was Frank's gift to the world, and it would keep giving, generation after generation, long after everyone who had known him was gone. The car wound through the night, carrying a family built on love and kindness and the stubborn refusal to drive past someone in need. Above them, the stars shone down, eternal witnesses to the small moments of grace that shaped human lives. And somewhere on the highways of America, a trucker was pulling into a gas station. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were in a hurry. Maybe they had 1,000 reasons to fill up and drive away. But maybe, just maybe, they would notice a scared child in a corner booth. And maybe they would make the same choice Frank Morrison had made all those years ago. Maybe they would stop. Maybe they would ask. Maybe they would say yes. And everything would be different. That was the hope Lily carried in her heart. That was the legacy Frank had left behind. That was the story that would never end as long as there were people willing to see the need in another's eyes and respond with love. One moment of kindness, one life transformed, one endless ripple of grace, forever and ever, without end. Lily finished the story as they pulled into the driveway, her grandchildren already half asleep, but still smiling. She carried Rose inside while Michael took Martha, and they tucked the girls into bed in the room that had once been Lily's, in the house that had once been Rose's, under the oak tree that had witnessed everything. "Good night, my loves," Lily whispered, kissing each forehead. "Dream of good things." She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them sleep, thinking about all the nights she had lain awake in this same room, feeling safe for the first time in her young life, thinking about Rose's warm arms and Frank's gentle voice and the impossible luck that had brought them all together. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for everything." And she could have sworn, just for a moment, that she heard Frank's voice whisper back, "You're welcome, kiddo. You're welcome." Lily smiled, wiped her eyes, and went to join her husband. The night was quiet. The stars were bright. And somewhere out there, on all the roads that crossed and connected and carried people to their destinies, kindness was still happening. One stop at a time. One yes at a time, one life at a time. That was enough. That was everything. That was the beautiful, improbable, miraculous truth. The world could change. All it took was someone willing to stop. All it took was someone willing to see. All it took was someone willing to say yes. And Frank Morrison, tired old trucker, had shown them all how it was done.